The Crimson Bridge catastrophe. Scandal alert. The Manhattan dream wedding implodes into a Wall Street nightmare before the adrenaline hits. If you love stories with earth-shattering twists and epic corporate vengeance, please like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. Your support makes it possible for us to deliver intense dramas like this. The curtain dropped on the masquerade. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria in New York City fell into a chilling, deathly silence. One moment, flutes of chilled champagne were clinking, celebrating the union of a multi-billion-dollar property heir and a quiet girl from a forgotten upstate town. The next, the sound of a dry, brutal slap echoed off the marble walls. The groom's hand, red and stinging on his bride's cheek, was raised not in a toast, but in an act of violence before 1,000 guests, the entire elite of the financial capital. A matrimonial fairy tale had just shattered, but the real explosion was still to come when the bride's father, a quiet, unassuming man, slowly stood up and began to take off his face, the mark of humiliation. Clara Vance felt the sting before she heard the gasp ripple through the opulent room. The force of the blow snapped her head sideways, causing her pearl and diamond drop earring, a gift from her new mother-in-law, to roll across the polished floor. For a frozen second, the world was a muffled buzz, a kaleidoscope of blurred faces staring in disbelief. Then the burning, throbbing pain spread across her cheek, a crimson mark of utter humiliation. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, stood before her, his handsome face contorted into a mask of pure fury. His eyes, the same ones that had crinkled with laughter just hours earlier while exchanging vows, were now cold, hard stones. "How dare you!" His voice was a low, menacing snarl that cut through the stunned silence. "How dare you embarrass me like this?" The embarrassment was a photograph, a grainy, simple image displayed on the enormous screen behind the wedding stage, which moments before had projected a romantic montage of their courtship. It showed Clara, years younger, standing next to another man on a dimly lit Brooklyn street. They weren't kissing or even holding hands, but the man's arm was casually draped over her shoulder. It was innocent, a relic from a past she'd almost forgotten. But someone had sent it to Marcus's phone, mid-banquet, with a caption dripping poison. "Still thinking about your old flame, even on your wedding day, Marcus. Come on, that's nothing," Clara whispered, her voice trembling as she cradled her sore cheek. "That was from college, years ago. His name is Leo. We were just friends." "Friends?" Marcus sneered, his laugh high and cruel. The entirety of the Thorne family, a dynasty that controlled half the luxury condo market in Manhattan, watched from the presidential table. His mother, Eleanor, watched with a tight-lipped expression of disapproval, not for her son's violence, but for the interruption of her perfectly orchestrated event. His father, Vincent Thorne, a man whose name struck fear in business rivals, simply adjusted his tie, his face an indecipherable mask of indifference. "You're a liar and a cheat," Marcus spat, raising his voice. "You thought you could marry into the Thorne family with secrets? You thought we wouldn't find out about your sordid past?" Tears streamed down Clara's face, mixing with the stinging pain. She looked out at the sea of faces. Business magnates, socialites, government officials, all whispering, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. This was her dream wedding, the culmination of a whirlwind romance that had felt like a Cinderella story. Marcus had been charming. He had swept her off her feet. He had promised her the world. Now he was the one tearing it apart. Her own family was a quiet, small island in this ocean of wealth and power. Her mother gripped her father's arm, her face white with shock. And her father, her sweet, simple father, Mr. Patrick Owens, was a retired high school history teacher, a man who had spent his life in a modest apartment in Queens, a man who always smelled faintly of old books and mild pipe tobacco. He had looked so out of place in his rented tuxedo, his calloused hands nervously clasped in his lap. Now he was slowly, deliberately rising to his feet. Mr. Owens pushed his chair back. The scrape of its legs against the marble floor was unnaturally loud in the silent room. He was not a big man, but as he rose, he seemed to cast a shadow that extended far beyond his physical form. He looked at his daughter, his eyes full of pain that mirrored hers. Then he fixed his gaze on Marcus, and for the first time that day, his expression was not one of nervous deference. It was something else entirely, something cold, ancient, and dangerous. "You will not speak to my daughter that way," Mr. Owens said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that silenced the whispers. It was firm, devoid of the tremor of an old man. Marcus turned, a sneer twisting his lips. "And who are you to tell me what to do? A penniless old teacher? You should be on your knees thanking us for taking this used luggage off your hands." He punctuated the insult by shoving Clara. Not hard, but enough to make her stumble backward, her beautiful custom-made gown, worth more than all her father's life savings, snagging on a chair. Can you imagine the rage? How do you think an average father would react to this public outrage? Comment below before the shock continues. The ghost of Barcelona is revealed. It was then the world tilted on its axis. Mr. Owens did not rush. He did not yell. He simply walked with a calm, measured pace toward the stage. He strode past his sobbing daughter, his eyes fixed on the sneering groom. When he reached center stage, standing right in front of the powerful Thorn heir, he did something no one could have predicted. He reached up to the side of his face, his fingers finding a nearly invisible seam just beneath his ear, and with a faint tearing sound, he began to peel away the skin. The wrinkles, the age spots of the humble teacher, Mr. Owens, began to lift off. Beneath was not flesh, but a smooth, synthetic surface. The mask came off, revealing a face that was decades younger, harder, and terrifyingly familiar to a select few in the room. Vincent Thorn, Marcus's father, who had remained impassive throughout the entire ordeal, shot to his feet. His face drained of all color. His wine glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. "It can't be," he whispered, a sound of pure terror. Damien Cross. The name hung in the air like the prelude to a storm. Damien Cross, a ghost, a legend in the underworld, the phantom architect of the fall of a dozen corporate empires 20 years ago in Chicago. A man rumored to be dead or living on a private island under a dozen aliases. He was Clara's father, and he had just watched a spoiled brat slap his only daughter. Damien Cross, no longer the stooped Mr. Owens, let the hyper-realistic mask drop onto the stage. He stretched his neck, the muscles taut and defined. The eyes that stared at Marcus were not the soft, watery eyes of a teacher. They were the piercing, analytical eyes of a predator. "Let's try this again," Damien Cross said, his voice now a silken, deadly whisper. "Were you saying something about used luggage?" The silence that followed the unmasking was a physical entity, heavy and suffocating. The air in the Waldorf Astoria ballroom, once thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, now crackled with an ozone of pure fear. The name Damien Cross was a master key, unlocking forgotten closets in the minds of the city's most powerful men. They remembered the whispered stories, the sudden bankruptcies, the rivals who had simply vanished. And now the ghost stood on a wedding stage, his eyes locked on the Thorn heir. Marcus was frozen, his bravado evaporating like mist in a furnace. The face before him was one he recognized from his father's most secret files, a black and white photo marked with a red X. This was the man his father had spent 2 decades hunting, the architect of a hostile takeover that had nearly cost them everything in the early 2000s. "You're supposed to be dead," Marcus stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Damien Cross allowed a small, chilling smile to touch his lips. "Reports of my demise were, as you can see, greatly exaggerated. I preferred a quiet life. I was content to be a simple history professor. But you," he took a step forward, and Marcus flinched. "You put your hands on my daughter. You disturbed my peace." Vincent Thorne, Marcus's father, finally found his voice. It was strained, cracking under a pressure no business deal had ever exerted. "Cross, let's be reasonable. This is a misunderstanding. A family dispute." Damien's gaze shifted to him. It was a look that stripped Vincent of his billion-dollar empire, his custom-tailored suit, his carefully constructed persona of power, leaving him naked and afraid. "Reasonable?" Damien repeated. "Was it reasonable, Vincent, when you hired thugs to torch my first office building with my wife still inside? Was it reasonable when you used that insurance money to lay the first brick of this pathetic empire?" A collective gasp went through the room. This wasn't just a business rivalry. This was a vendetta, a blood feud. Clara stared at her father, her mind reeling. The quiet, gentle man who read her bedtime stories, the man who grieved for her mother, a woman she'd been told died from a sudden illness, was this formidable stranger. Her whole life, her entire identity, felt like a carefully constructed lie. "That's a lie," Vincent sputtered, but his sweaty forehead and shifty eyes betrayed him. "You have no proof." "Proof," Damien laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He reached into the inner pocket of his rented tuxedo and pulled out not a weapon, but a small, sleek USB flash drive. He held it up for all to see. "I spent 20 years being a ghost, Vincent. Ghosts have time. They watch, they listen, and they collect. On this drive is every illegal transaction, every bribed official, every shell company you've ever used. It contains the original police report of the arson you paid to have buried, along with a sworn statement from the man you paid to light the match." He was surprisingly chatty before he passed away in a boating accident last year. He turned his attention back to Marcus, whose face was now the color of ash. "As for you, you spoiled little prince, the photo you received. Who do you think sent it?" The twist was so bold, it took a moment to register. "I did," Damien stated calmly. "I sent the photo. I knew your temper. I knew your arrogance. I knew you were a weak, insecure boy who would react with violence rather than confidence. I needed to see if you were worthy of my daughter's love. You failed the test spectacularly." He had orchestrated the entire public humiliation, not of his daughter, but of the Thorne family. He had set a trap, and they had fallen squarely into it, exposing their true, rotten nature for the world to see. Eleanor Thorne, who had been a statue of horrified silence, finally broke. "Monster! You planned this! You used your own daughter!" "I used my daughter's capacity for forgiveness," Damien corrected, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "She saw goodness in your son where there was none. I, on the other hand, see things as they are. And what I see is a family of criminals who built their fortune on the ashes of my wife." He tossed the USB drive to a man in the front row, Director Maxwell Salas of the FBI's Complex Financial Crimes Division. "I believe you've been looking for this, Director. A little wedding gift from me." The official, a man known for his bulldog tenacity, caught the drive, his eyes wide. He looked from the drive to Vincent Thorne, and a slow, grim smile spread across his face. The foundation of the Thorne Empire had just cracked, Damien then turned back to Clara. The hardness in his face instantly softened, replaced by the familiar love and pain of the father she knew. "My dearest Clara," his voice was choked with emotion. "I am so sorry for the life of lies I made you live. I did it to protect you, to keep you safe from them." He gently touched her bruised cheek, his fingers tracing the red mark left by Marcus's hand. "But now I see the only way to protect you is to dismantle the world that hurts you." He turned and faced the Thorne family one last time. "This isn't over," he promised, his voice a quiet vow of destruction. "This is only the beginning. By the time I'm done, the Thorne name will be nothing but a whispered fable in the dark." Without another word, he took Clara's hand, and together they walked off the stage, leaving behind a shattered wedding, a terrified groom, and the smoldering ruins of a corporate dynasty. The guests, frozen in their seats, could only watch as the legend of Damien Cross was reborn in fire and vengeance. Mid-story action break. The shock in that room must have been electric. If the tension has you hooked, make sure to like and comment with a "If you believe revenge is a dish best served cold." The command center and the final turn. The drive from the Waldorf Astoria was a blur for Clara. The bright city lights blurred in the windows of a discreet black sedan that had appeared out of nowhere the moment they exited the hotel. Her father, Damien Cross, sat beside her. No longer the frail Mr. Owens, but a man who radiated a quiet, coiled energy. The rented tuxedo had been replaced with a simple dark gray Henley shirt and black pants that seemed more suited to his true persona. Clara's mind was a vortex of emotions. The pain in her cheek was a dull throb, a physical anchor to the surreal nightmare. Betrayal mixed with a strange, soaring sense of awe. The man who bandaged her scraped knees and helped her with history homework was capable of taking down industrial titans. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. The wedding dress felt like a costume from another life, heavy and ridiculous. "Somewhere safe," he replied, his eyes on the road. "A place I prepared a long time ago." The safe house was an unmarked warehouse in the city's industrial sector, but behind a corrugated steel door that hissed open with a silent hydraulic sigh was a different world. It was a minimalist, high-tech command center. A bank of monitors lined one wall, displaying a dizzying array of financial data, news feeds, and security camera footage from across the city. A long conference table dominated the center of the room, and in the corner was a small, functional living space. A woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair, pulled back into a severe bun, rose from a chair. It was Maria, the woman Clara had known all her life as Aunt Maria, the kind neighbor who always brought over pastries and looked after her father. "The package has been delivered, Damien," Maria said, her voice clear and professional. "Salas has already convened an emergency task force. Thorne Group assets are being frozen as we speak." "Aunt Maria?" Clara breathed, completely bewildered. Maria offered her a soft, apologetic smile. "My real name is General Maria Estrada, former military intelligence. I retired the same time your father died." The ground beneath Clara's feet crumbled a little further. Her entire neighborhood, her entire life. It was a stage. Damien Cross led her to the monitors. "Watch," he said, pointing to a newsfeed. The headline was explosive. "Thorne Group CEO and heir arrested in wide-ranging corruption probe. Assets frozen." A live video showed a frantic Vincent Thorne being escorted out of his mansion by FBI agents. Marcus was beside him, his face a mask of gaping disbelief, his wedding tuxedo now wrinkled and stained. Eleanor was screaming at the cameras, a stark contrast to her earlier glacial composure. "You did this," Clara whispered. "In 1 hour you destroyed them." They destroyed themselves 20 years ago when they chose greed over humanity, Damien corrected gently. I am simply collecting the debt. He pointed to another screen showing a complex web of financial transactions. This is what I've been doing for 2 decades, my love. Not just teaching history, but mapping every dirty secret of the man who killed your mother. I built a financial weapon, a virus designed to dismantle their empire from the inside out, piece by piece. The USB drive was just the key to activate it. He explained the plan, his voice calm and methodical. The virus wasn't just data. It was a series of automated, timed stock dumps triggered by specific keywords in the news. The moment the media reported the investigation, the shell companies he controlled across the globe began to sell off Thorn Group stock, triggering a panic sell. Simultaneously, anonymous tips were sent to international regulators about the group's offshore accounts, freezing their international capital. It was a multifaceted assault, a corporate blitzkrieg he had spent half a lifetime engineering. But why, Dad? Clara asked, tears finally coming again, this time not from humiliation, but from deep confusion and hurt. Why the lies? Why couldn't you have just been my father? His face softened, the hardened strategist replaced by the loving parent. He pulled her into a hug, his embrace strong and secure. Because they would have found us. His voice choked with 2 decades of pain. Vincent was obsessed. He knew I survived the fire. He had people searching for me, searching for any surviving family. If he had ever discovered I had a daughter, Clara, there is no line he wouldn't have crossed to get to me through you. So I died. Mr. Owens was born, a boring, harmless man no one would look at twice. It was the only way to give you a normal life, a safe life. A ping from one of the computers drew Maria's attention. Damien, you need to see this. On one of the security feeds labeled Thorn Secondary Residence, they saw a flurry of activity. A black van had pulled up to a luxurious villa in the Hamptons. Men in dark suits were rushing inside. That's not Salas's team, Maria noted, frowning. Those aren't government plates. Damien Cross zoomed in on the face of one of the men. A cold recognition dawned on his face. Silas the Viper, he muttered. An old acquaintance. Works for the highest bidder. Specializes in extractions and disappearances. Who would hire him? Clara asked. Her heart pounding. Someone with more to lose than just money, Damien answered, his mind racing. The Thorn Group didn't operate in a vacuum. They were the public face of a much more dangerous, shadowy consortium of investors. Vincent was their money launderer. With him gone, the consortium is exposed. They are not trying to save Vincent. They are trying to clean up loose ends. Another screen lit up with an incoming video call. The caller ID was blocked. Maria patched it to the main display. The face that appeared was haggard, his eyes full of desperate, wild cunning. He was in the back of a moving vehicle, city lights blurred behind him. It was Marcus. You, he growled, his voice a venomous hiss. You think you've won? You've just signed your own death warrant, and hers. Let me guess, Damien said, his voice deceptively calm. Your father's silent partners aren't happy. They want the original data. They want the real ledgers from which your virus was built, Marcus spat. They know a copy on a USB isn't your style. You have the source code. They'll trade it for my father. But if you refuse, they know about him. He gestured vaguely, and the camera shifted to show a bound and gagged figure in the seat next to him. It was Leo, the man from the photograph. Clara gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. He was easy to find, Marcus sneered. Just a little digging into your daughter's innocent past. We have his family too. You have 1 hour to deliver the source data at the Crimson Bridge, the old rail bridge over the Harlem River. If you're late, or if we see one cop, he dies first. Then his family. Then we'll spend every resource we have hunting your little girl. You can't hide forever. My father's partners have a very long reach." The screen went black. Clara turned to her father, her eyes wide with terror. "Dad, what are we going to do?" Damien stared at the screen where Marcus's sneering face had been. The mask of the cold strategist was back in place, but his eyes held a fire hotter than any boardroom battle. This was no longer about money or revenge. It was about his daughter's life and innocent people caught in the crossfire. "Maria," he said, his voice like ice. "Prep the package, but not the real one. Load the secondary virus onto a hard drive. The one we designed for a scorched earth scenario." He turned to Clara, his expression grim. "He's right about one thing. We can't hide forever. So we stop hiding." He walked over to a steel locker and opened it. Inside, nestled in custom-made foam, was not a laptop, but a sleek, matte black handgun and several clips of ammunition. "Tonight," Damien Cross said as he expertly checked the weapon, "we end this for good. Black pawn." The final chess match at the Crimson Bridge. The Crimson Bridge arched over the dark, slow-moving waters of the Harlem River, its steel skeleton lit by the orange glow of the city. It was a place of transit, of movement, but tonight it felt like a final destination. The air was thick with moisture and the low rumble of impending violence. Damien Cross stood at the bridge's midpoint, a solitary figure silhouetted against the distant skyline. He held a steel briefcase in one hand. He looked like a businessman waiting for a late-night deal, but the cold, focused calm in his posture spoke of a different kind of commerce. Clara and Maria were 2 miles away at the command center. A live feed from a drone silently hovering high above the bridge played on their main screen. Clara's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" she had pleaded before he left. "There has to be another way. In their world, this is the only language they understand," he had replied, giving her a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. "Trust me." A black van, the same one from the villa, screeched to a halt at the opposite end of the bridge. 2 burly figures emerged, their suits doing little to conceal their muscular frames. Then Marcus stepped out, dragging a terrified Leo with him, a pistol held firmly to his temple. "Cross!" Marcus's voice was sharp, cutting through the night air. "You came alone. Smart. Now toss the briefcase. Show me he's unharmed first." "You're not in a position to make demands," Marcus yelled, his laughter high-pitched and unhinged. He shoved the gun harder against Leo's head, making the young man whimper in fear. "The briefcase, now!" With a deliberate motion, Damien set the briefcase on the ground and slid it across the asphalt. It coasted smoothly, stopping a few feet from the van. One of Marcus's thugs approached cautiously, keeping his eyes on Damien, while the other kept his weapon trained on the silent darkness surrounding the bridge. "Open it," Marcus ordered. The thug knelt, undid the latches, and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in foam, was a portable hard drive. He gave Marcus a nod. "The source code." Marcus sneered at Damien. "See, in the end, even legends have a price, and your price is your daughter's life." "A price I'm willing to pay," Damien said, lowering his voice. "But not to you." It was a cue. From the command center, Maria's fingers flew across a keyboard. "Phase 2. Ready." The hard drive in the briefcase began to emit a high-pitched whine. A small LED flickered from green to red. The thug's eyes widened in panic. "Boss, it's a—" He never finished the sentence. The hard drive wasn't a bomb in the conventional sense. It was an EMP, a powerful, miniaturized electromagnetic pulse device. A flash of blue-white light burst from the briefcase, and every electronic device within a 50-foot radius instantly died. The van's engine coughed and stalled. The bridge lights flickered and went out. The drone feed dissolved into static. Marcus's phone, which he was using to communicate with his backers, went dead. They were plunged into an unsettling, isolated darkness, lit only by the distant city glow. In the command center, Clara cried out, "The signal is gone! What's happening?" "It's the plan," Maria said, her voice tight, her eyes fixed on the blank screens. "He's cut them off. He's on his own now." On the bridge, the sudden darkness and silence were disorienting. For a fraction of a second, everyone froze. It was the moment Damien Cross had been waiting for. He moved with a speed that defied his apparent age, a blur of motion in the gloom. He wasn't aiming for Marcus. He was aiming for his men. Before the first thug could even process the EMP blast, Damien had closed the distance. There was a sickening crunch of bone as he landed a precise, incapacitating strike to the man's knee, followed by a swift blow to the temple that sent him collapsing to the pavement, unconscious. The second thug, regaining his senses, swiveled his weapon towards the sound, but Damien was already moving, using the van as cover. He kicked the vehicle's door with tremendous force, slamming it against the man and pinning him against the van's frame. A second kick disarmed him. It was over in under 5 seconds. 2 professional enforcers neutralized with brutal efficiency. Marcus, in a panic, fired his pistol wildly into the darkness. Bullets whizzed, ricocheting off the bridge's steel beams with loud pings. Leo, in a moment of pure survival instinct, dropped to the ground, crawling away from the madly firing Marcus. "You can't hide, old man!" Marcus shrieked, his voice cracking with fear and rage. A calm voice emerged from the darkness directly behind him. "I'm not hiding." Marcus spun around, eyes wide with terror. Damien Cross was there, untouched. The matte black handgun from the locker now in his hand, held with the relaxed confidence of a seasoned professional. He hadn't fired a single shot. "It's over, Marcus," Damien said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's not over!" Marcus screamed, raising his pistol to shoot, but his hands trembled uncontrollably. His shot went wide, shattering the night silence. Damien didn't flinch. He didn't return fire. Instead, he made a small, almost imperceptible gesture with his free hand. From the shadows beneath the bridge, a spotlight snapped on, pinning Marcus in its brilliant white shaft of light. Simultaneously, the low rumble of a powerful engine filled the air as a police speedboat sped into view on the river, its blue and red lights flashing. Standing on its bow was Director Salas of the FBI, a megaphone in hand. "Marcus Thorne!" Salas's voice boomed over the water. "You are surrounded. Drop your weapon now." Marcus looked wildly from the boat to Damien, his face a mess of confusion and desperation. You called the cops! I told you not to!" "I didn't call them," Damien said simply. "I own the company that manufactures their new encrypted communication systems. They've been listening to every word you've said since you made your call. They were just waiting for you to make your move." It was the final checkmate. Every move Marcus had made, every threat, every demand, had been anticipated and countered. He was not a player in this game. He was a pawn moved to a corner by a grandmaster. With a final desperate cry of rage, Marcus spun his weapon not towards Damien, but himself. Before anyone could react, he jammed the pistol to his head. "Stop!" Clara's voice suddenly screamed. Everyone froze. She was running onto the bridge, her wedding dress gathered in her hands, her face streaked with tears. Maria was right behind her, trying to pull her back. "Don't do it, Marcus," she pleaded. "It's not worth it." Marcus looked at her, his eyes vacant, the gun still pressed to his temple. He saw the woman he was supposed to love, the woman he had brutalized, now begging for his life. For a moment, a flicker of something. Shame, regret, a tiny piece of the man he could have been, crossed his face. "He's stalling," Maria hissed to Damien. "It's a classic tactic. He's waiting for his real backup. Damien's eyes narrowed. Maria was right. The consortium wouldn't rely on a loose cannon like Marcus. This was a distraction. His gaze swept the dark, opposite end of the bridge. He saw it then. A faint, glittering reflection. The unmistakable signature of a sniper scope. They weren't here for Marcus. They were here for him. And his daughter was directly in the line of fire. "Clara, get down!" he roared, lunging toward her. The crack of the sniper rifle echoed across the bridge, a sound far sharper and deadlier than Marcus's pistol. The world slowed to a stop as Damien Cross dove, shoving Clara onto the hard bridge asphalt. He felt a white-hot agony tear through his shoulder. The force of the impact spun him, and he landed heavily on his side, his vision momentarily swimming in a red haze. The sniper's shot had found its mark. "Dad!" Clara screamed, scrambling towards him, her voice filled with terror. On the river, Director Salas's voice boomed over the megaphone. "Sniper! North end of the bridge! All units advance!" The police speedboat surged forward, its spotlight sweeping the darkness. Marcus, shocked by the sudden turn of events, hesitated for a fatal second. The sniper wasn't his backup, it was his executioner. They were cleaning up all loose ends. Realizing he was just another liability to be erased, he dropped his own weapon and raised his hands in surrender as police officers swarmed the bridge. Ignoring the chaos, Maria rushed to Damien's side, her military days medical training kicking into gear. She quickly assessed, applying pressure to the wound. "You missed the artery, but you're losing blood. We need to get you out of here." "Not yet." Damien grit his teeth against the pain, a sickening wave. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his eyes fixed on the opposite end of the bridge where the shot had originated. They won't send just one. They'll have a team. They need the source data. They're coming for it. As if on cue, the roar of high-performance engines filled the night. Two black sedans, faster and more menacing than the van, sped onto the bridge from the north, their tires squealing as they weaved through the abandoned cars. Men in tactical gear, armed with assault rifles, leaned out of the windows, firing to force the police to take cover. These were no ordinary thugs, they were highly trained mercenaries. "They're going for the command center," Maria realized with a gasp of horror. "The drone signal is down, but they know it originated nearby." "Clara," Damien said, his voice strained but clear, gripping his daughter's arm. "Listen to me. They don't know what you look like. They only know me. You need to blend in with the civilians being evacuated by the police. Get off this bridge. Go." "No, I won't leave you," she cried, her tears falling onto his blood-soaked shirt. "You must," he insisted, his gaze intense. "This is bigger than the Thorne family. It's about the people behind them. If they get their hands on that data, they will destabilize the entire country's economy for their own benefit. The command center has a self-destruct sequence. Maria knows the code, but you have to be safe. I won't lose you too." His words, a final plea from a father to his daughter, finally broke through her panic. With a sob, she nodded. Maria helped her up. "Go now. We'll create a distraction." As Clara ran off, blending in with a group of shocked motorists being led to safety, Maria turned back to Damien. "What's the distraction, Damien?" He looked at the approaching sedans, a grim, defiant smile on his lips. "The ghost makes one final appearance." He struggled to stand, using a concrete barrier for support, his left arm dangling uselessly at his side. With his right hand, he raised his handgun. He was outmanned and outgunned, a wounded man against an assassination squad. But he was Damien Cross, and he stood on his chosen battlefield. He fired 2 precise shots, not at the men, but at the front tires of the lead car. The rubber exploded, and the sedan swerved violently, smashing into the side of the bridge with a screech of tortured metal. The second car was forced to brake hard to avoid a collision. The mercenaries piled out, using their vehicles as cover, their weapons aimed at him. From the lead car, a figure emerged. He wasn't dressed in tactical gear, but an impeccably tailored Italian suit that looked absurdly out of place. He was an older man with silver hair and the cold, dead eyes of a shark. "Damien Cross," the man said, his voice quiet and cultured, easily audible in the tense silence. "It's been a long time. I am Mr. Sokolov, a representative of the consortium. You have caused us a great deal of inconvenience." "Sokolov," Damien recognized, his mind racing. He recognized the name, a phantom figure in international finance, a man who moved billions for rogue states and crime syndicates. He was the architect of the shadows, the true power behind men like Vincent Thorne. "The data cross," Sokolov said, as if discussing the weather. "Give it to us, and we will let you die quickly. A courtesy for old time's sake. Resist, and we will find your daughter. We are very, very good at finding people. We will take our time with her, and we will make you watch." It was the ultimate threat. But Sokolov had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was dealing with a cornered man. In reality, he was dealing with a man who had just watched his daughter escape to safety, a man with nothing left to lose. "You want the data?" Damien yelled, a strange, triumphant light in his eyes. "You should have checked your bank accounts first." Sokolov frowned. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He pulled out a satellite phone, unaffected by the localized EMP, and made a quick call. As he listened, his composure finally shattered. His face went from pale to livid. "What have you done?" he roared into the phone, then to Damien. From her new vantage point at the command center, Maria saw it happen on the financial feeds. The scorched earth virus she had loaded onto the decoy hard drive hadn't been an EMP. That was a separate device. The hard drive itself contained a far more insidious weapon. When the thug opened the briefcase, it didn't just trigger the EMP. It also sent a wireless pulse to a hidden receiver in the van that was connected to the internet via a satellite link. That pulse authenticated the virus, which then unleashed itself across the entire consortium's financial network. It wasn't designed to steal or expose. It was designed to corrupt. It was a data-shredding algorithm of pure chaos, turning trillions of dollars of assets into meaningless digital noise. It was tearing through their offshore servers, wiping accounts, falsifying records, and bringing their entire shadow economy to a grinding halt. "I just collected another debt," Damien shouted, his voice ringing with victory. "The one you owed the world!" Sokolov, in a fit of blind rage, raised his own weapon. "Kill him! Kill him now!" The mercenaries opened fire. A hail of bullets chewed at the concrete barrier where Damien was. But he was already ready gun. In the split second of Sokolov's distraction, he had dropped behind the barrier, rolling to the edge of the bridge. He scrambled over the railing, fired one last shot from his pistol. Not at Sokolov, but at a thick power cable running along the side of the bridge, causing a shower of sparks. And then, without hesitation, he leapt over the side and plunged into the dark water below. Sokolov and his men ran to the edge, firing into the river, but it was useless. Damien Cross had vanished once more, swallowed by the night. The architect of the shadows had been outmaneuvered. His empire of smoke and mirrors was collapsing around him, all because of a ghost he thought he could control. A new dawn, the Mediterranean respite. The dive into the Harlem River was a brutal, icy shock that stole Damien's breath. For a moment, the world was a roaring black chaos. The agony in his shoulder flared, a supernova of pain that threatened to drag him into unconsciousness. Bullets smacked the water around him, their deadly tracks marked by brief, phosphorescent zippers in the gloom. He fought the instinct to panic. His decades of discipline took over. He forced himself to float, letting the strong current become his ally, dragging him swiftly away from the bridge and the circle of death blooming on the surface. Above, Sokolov stared at the dark, turbulent waters, his face a mask of incandescent fury. The plan was in tatters. His 2-decade-long hunt culminated in this final, infuriating act of defiance. The ghost had not only escaped, but he had taken their entire financial world with him. "Find him!" he snarled at his men. "I want his body! I want his head!" But he knew it was useless. The river was deep, the current treacherous. Cross had planned this. Every step was a calculation, and this was his final, brilliant checkmate move. The architect of the shadows was left powerless, his empire of secrets and blood money dissolving into digital dust. Downriver, Damien fought for every inch. His vision tunneled. The city lights above blurred into a meaningless smear. His wounded body screamed surrender for the sweet final piece of the abyss. But one image burned in his mind. Clara's face, terrified but alive, disappearing into the crowd. That image was his fuel. He swam, his movements growing slower, until his searching hand finally brushed against the rough, viscous texture of a wooden piling. The old ferry terminal, his extraction point. With the last drops of his legendary will, he hauled his broken body out of the water, collapsing exhausted onto the rotting pier. His breathing, a harsh, desperate gasp. A moment later, a silent black Zodiac boat, its engine barely a whisper, pulled up to the pier. Maria was at the helm, her face grim but steady. "I was beginning to worry," she said, her voice tinged with a respect that transcended their long association. With expert proficiency, she helped him aboard, her hands already working to apply a pressure bandage to his wound. "You are a stubborn, foolish old man, Damien." "It's genetic," he gasped. A faint smile touched his lips before he finally allowed the exhaustion to claim him. 2 days later, the world felt a long way off. In a quiet, sun-drenched villa overlooking the turquoise Mediterranean Sea and the port of Serenity, another of Damien's meticulously planned contingencies on the Spanish coast, Clara finished changing the bandage on her father's shoulder. The bullet had been removed by a discreet doctor, a man whose loyalty Damien had secured years ago. It was healing, the physical wound closing far faster than the invisible ones they both carried. He sat on the terrace, gazing out at the endless expanse of water, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked truly at peace. The watchful, tormented quality in his eyes was gone. "How do you feel?" she asked softly, sitting beside him, like a man who has finally finished his life's work. His voice was quiet. He reached out for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "Now I can begin the life I always wanted, just being your father. No more secrets, Clara. No more lies." She squeezed his hand, a genuine, joyful smile illuminating her face. "I would like that very much." She followed his gaze to the horizon, her mind so much like his, already moving, strategizing. "You know," she began thoughtfully, "the news is calling it Digital Zero event. You didn't just ruin the Thorns. You destroyed a multi-trillion-dollar shadow economy. You crippled crime syndicates, destabilized corrupt regimes. You gave the world a chance." He nodded slightly. "They had it coming. The government will eventually release the legitimate Thorn Group assets," she continued, a sly, familiar glint in her eyes. "And with your own extensive resources, one person could build something powerful from the ashes, a foundation dedicated to helping the victims of men like Sokolov and Vincent Thorn, a foundation that could fight their kind of corruption on a global scale. But this time, in the full light of day." Damien Cross turned to look at his daughter, to truly look at her. He saw not the naive girl who had walked into a disastrous fairy tale, but a formidable, intelligent woman, forged in the crucible of his war. She possessed his own strategic brilliance, but it was tempered with her mother's deep, unbreakable compassion. She was his true legacy. The Crosslight Foundation, he mused, the name tasting like hope. A slow, proud smile spread across his face. I like the sound of that. But make no mistake, Clara, it will be your foundation, your vision. I'm officially retired. I'm just the old history professor who's surprisingly good with accounts. They sat together in a deep, comfortable silence, watching the sun dip beneath the ocean, igniting the sky in shades of fiery orange and soft gold. The storm had passed, the ghosts had been exorcised, and for the first time, the future was not a carefully plotted contingency plan or a desperate flight from danger, but a vast, open horizon, shimmering with infinite promise. A new dawn was breaking, not just for a father and his daughter, but for the countless lives they would now touch and change for the better. The dark legend of Damien Cross was finally over. The brilliant legacy of Clara Cross was just beginning. Conclusion and reflection. What you just heard was more than a story of revenge. It was a testament to the unbreakable bond between a father and child, and a reminder that true strength often hides beneath the most unassuming exterior. The world is full of secrets, and sometimes the most dramatic truths are just waiting to be unmasked. Interactive question. What would you do with the power of the Crosslight Foundation? Which corrupt magnate would you unmask first? Leave your answer in the comments. If this story of intrigue, sacrifice, and final justice resonated, please take a moment to share this video with someone who loves a powerful plot twist. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support allows us to bring more incredible dramas like this to life. Thank you for listening. Would you like me to help you translate and rewrite a second story with an equally cinematic style? The $50 billion secret. The wedding that was an execution. The wedding reception was flawless. Held at the opulent Thayer family estate in the Hamptons, it was the social event of the season. Ilara Vance, a quiet curator, was marrying tech billionaire Ethan Thayer. But as the champagne flowed, Ilara approached the microphone, her hand steady. "I'd like to propose a toast," she began, her voice echoing across the ballroom. "A toast to my new family." But what came next wasn't a toast. It was an execution. In front of 500 elite guests, she exposed her new in-laws and the woman who betrayed her. But the biggest shock? What the billionaire groom said next. Subscribe now and like this video to find out. New money, old scorn. The world knew Ilara Vance as the quiet, brilliant museum curator who had captured the heart of Ethan Thayer, the elusive billionaire CEO of Nexus Dynamics. Their romance was a modern fairy tale, the shy art historian and the tech titan. Ethan was not old money like his parents. He had built his empire from scratch, a fact his parents, Arthur and Genevieve Thayer, never let him forget. The Thayers were Mayflower money, a lineage that dripped with contempt for anyone outside their exclusive world. From the moment Ethan introduced Ilara, they treated her not as a fiancée, but as a curiosity, a temporary project Ethan would soon tire of. "She's quaint," Genevieve had remarked at their engagement party, her eyes scanning Ilara's simple, elegant dress. "But Ethan, darling, the Thayer name requires a certain polish." "She's a genius, mother," Ethan had countered, his arm tightening around Ilara's waist. "She has more substance than our entire social register combined." But the subtle war continued. Genevieve and Arthur saw Ilara as a threat to their control over the Thayer legacy. They wanted Ethan to marry blue blood, a woman from a family they could merge with, not a commoner who worked in a museum. The wedding became their chosen battlefield. It was to be held at Greycliff, the sprawling family estate in the Hamptons. It was less a home than a monument to Gilded Age arrogance, perched on bluffs overlooking the Atlantic. Genevieve had seized the planning reins with military zeal, hiring vendors Alara had never heard of, ordering flowers Alara disliked, and compiling a guest list that included everyone but Alara's small family. "We simply don't have the room, dear," Genevieve had smiled, a thin, reptilian expression. "It's a very exclusive list. Senators, CEOs, you understand." Alara's only true ally, it seemed, was her cousin and maid of honor, Lauren. Lauren was everything Alara wasn't. Bubbly, outgoing, and effortlessly glamorous. She had been Alara's pillar, her confidant, her shield against the Thayer matriarch. "Don't let her get to you," Lauren would whisper, handing Alara a glass of champagne. "Genevieve is a fossil. You and Ethan are the future. Just smile, wear the dress, and get that ring." The ring, a dazzling Cartier square-cut diamond that felt heavier than a stone. It was a symbol not of love, but of possession. As the wedding week began, the pressure mounted. The estate buzzed with staff. Florist trucks and catering rigs clogged the long, winding drive. Alara felt like a ghost, haunting her own life, floating through rooms as decisions were made about her, never with her. "Ethan, this is insane," Alara said one night, standing on the terrace of their guest house. "This isn't a wedding, it's a corporate merger." Ethan, illuminated by the moonlight, turned to her. His face, usually so open and warm, looked weary. "I know, but it's the last battle, Alara. Once we're married, they lose. They lose their leverage, they lose their control. Just get through this, for me. Then we can go back to our life." But a persistent dread had settled in Alara's stomach. It wasn't just the snobbery. It was the way Arthur Thayer looked at her, like a chess piece he was about to sacrifice. And it was the way Lauren, her sweet, understanding cousin, kept checking her phone, her bright smiles never quite reaching her eyes. "You're nervous," Alara told herself, watching the fog roll in over the dark Atlantic. "It's just pre-wedding jitters." She was wrong. It wasn't jitters. It was her intuition, screaming that the fairy tale was a meticulously constructed lie, and she was the only one who didn't know the ending, the flaw in the perfect plan. The first crack appeared 3 days before the wedding, at the final dress fitting. Alara hadn't wanted a designer monstrosity. She had found a simple, exquisitely beaded 1930s vintage gown in a small antique shop. It was her something old. She loved it. Genevieve had insisted the fitting be held in Greycliff's grand living room. "We must see how it looks in the light," she'd insisted. Alara stood on the small dais, the dress fitting perfectly. Not even Genevieve's sour expression could ruin the moment. "It's beautiful, Alara," Ethan said, his voice soft. Genevieve glided over, holding a glass of Chateau Petrus red wine. "Yes, it's passable, though it washes you out a bit, dear. You lack the stature for vintage." She circled Alara like a shark. "It needs something, perhaps a brooch, a very, very large brooch." And then, with a theatrical gasp, Genevieve stumbled. It was a masterful performance. The glass of wine didn't just spill, it arced, soaking the entire cream-colored bodice of the gown with a stain that looked like blood. Alara stood paralyzed. The room went silent. The dress, her one piece of self in this whole charade, was ruined. Genevieve clapped her hands to her pearls. "Oh my God, how clumsy of me. That old frail silk, it's ruined. Completely ruined." Alara looked at the dark, spreading blotch, and then at Genevieve's eyes. There was no apology in them, only triumph. Before Ilara could even mourn, Lauren sprang into action. "Oh, Ilara, no, don't worry, I've got this." Lauren dashed from the room and returned moments later, holding a huge white garment bag. "I just knew something like this might happen. Genevieve is so erratic, so I came prepared." She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress that was the antithesis of Ilara's. It was a huge, modern Balenciaga ball gown, stiff with taffeta, encrusted with crystals. It was loud, flashy, and screamed new money. It was, Ilara realized with a jolt, a dress Genevieve would have chosen. "Try it on," Lauren urged, her smile too bright. How did you get this?" Ilara asked, her voice numb. "Oh, I have connections," Lauren said breezily. "Just pulled a few strings, knowing how important this wedding is. It's a sample. Look, it will be perfect." Ethan looked troubled. "Ilara, you don't have to." "Nonsense, Ethan," Genevieve interjected, her good humor miraculously restored. "Lauren has saved the day. She's proved far more capable than we thought. Ilara, put it on. We're on a schedule." Later that night, Ilara sat alone. The ruined vintage dress lay crumpled at her feet. Lauren's rescue felt wrong. How did she have a brand new, six-figure designer gown on standby? And why did it feel like a coordinated attack? "She's just trying to help," Ilara told herself. "You're paranoid." But the paranoia was taking root. She decided to get some air. She walked silently down the estate's long, carpeted hall. As she passed Arthur's study, she heard his voice, low and angry. She froze, pressing herself against the wall. "I don't care about appearances," Arthur was growling into the phone. "The prenup is ironclad. She signs it tomorrow, or Ethan cuts her out. But the real asset is the Blackwood clause. Once she's in, she's in. We just need her signature on the merger papers after the ceremony. Yes, as a formality. She'll be so dazed she won't even read it. And if she becomes a problem, well, the other arrangement will take care of her." Ilara's blood ran cold. Blackwood clause? Merger papers? Other arrangement? She slipped away, her heart hammering. This wasn't just about a dress. This was about something much, much bigger. They weren't just trying to humiliate her, they were trying to trap her. And the other arrangement sounded terrifyingly final. The curator's investigation. Ilara was a curator. Her entire life was dedicated to research, to finding the history beneath the surface, uncovering the provenance. She knew how to excavate. Now she had a new project, the Thayer family. She started that night. She told Ethan she had a migraine and locked herself in the guest house. Her first target, Lauren. The backup dress was the loose thread. Ilara searched online for the specific Balenciaga gown. It wasn't a sample. It was from the latest couture collection, a custom order, the kind of thing that takes months, not an just-in-case purchase. Ilara's mind raced. Lauren didn't have that kind of money or those connections. But Genevieve did. Ilara needed more. She remembered Lauren borrowing her laptop a week ago to check a flight. Ilara rarely used that laptop, but she opened it now. She ran a file recovery program, looking for recently deleted items. Bingo. A hidden folder, deleted from the desktop, but not the drive. It was labeled as contingency. Her hands shook. She clicked. It wasn't emails. It was a phone mirror. Lauren's phone. It looked like Lauren had backed up her phone to Ilara's laptop and forgotten to securely delete the file. The contents made Ilara physically ill. It was a text thread, not with a secret lover, not with a friend. It was with Arthur Thayer. Arthur. She's emotional, unstable. The dress incident was a masterpiece. She is off balance. Lauren. She is buying my supportive cousin act. She trusts me completely. Arthur. Good. The $50,000 has been transferred. Remember the plan. You are not seducing him yet. That comes after the honeymoon. Lauren. I know. I build her trust. She confides in me. After the wedding, I make my move on Ethan. He's lonely. She's difficult. I'll be the comfort he needs. Arthur. This marriage cannot last more than 6 months. When it falls apart, and he's caught in an infidelity scandal with his own wife's cousin, he'll be ruined. Genevieve and I will invoke the morality clause in the company bylaws. We will seize back control of the board. Nexus Dynamics will be ours again. Lauren. And my payout? Arthur. 10 million. And him if you can keep him. But I doubt it. Just do the job. Ilara leaned back, the laptop screen swimming. Lauren. Her cousin. Her maid of honor. She wasn't an ally. She was a mercenary, hired by Arthur and Genevieve. This entire time, the mistress plot wasn't for Ethan to cheat before the wedding. It was a long con. They were manufacturing a mistress, and it was Lauren. They were going to destroy Ethan's reputation, frame him for infidelity, and use the resulting scandal to seize his company. Ilara's humiliation? The dress? It was all just a psychological game to make her look erratic and unstable, to drive a wedge between her and Ethan before Lauren even made her move. She felt a surge of cold, clarifying rage. They thought she was a silly, fragile bird. They had no idea who they were dealing with, but then she remembered Arthur's phone call, the Blackwood clause, the merger papers. This affair plot was despicable, but it was a smokescreen. The texts didn't mention Blackwood. That was a different, deeper secret. The affair was to oust Ethan from the board. But what was the other part of the trap? The part meant for her? She had to get into Arthur's study. Ilara waited until 3 a.m. The massive estate was silent, shrouded in coastal fog. She crept from the guest house, dressed in black, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a curator, not a spy. But the principle was the same. Handle artifacts with care and leave no fingerprints. She had seen Arthur use his keypad code for the study before. His wedding anniversary? Pathetic. The heavy oak door clicked open. The study was a tomb of old money, smelling of leather, brandy, and privilege. His computer was on, a sleek, expensive desktop rig. It was password locked. Ilara's mind raced. What would a narcissist like Arthur use? She tried Thayer. No. Greycliff? No. Mayflower? No. Then she saw the small framed photo on his desk. It wasn't of his wife or son. It was of a racehorse. A small plaque on the frame read, Blackwood, winner of the Belmont Stakes, 1998. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. BLACKWOOD98. The screen unlocked. Ilara dove into the files. They were mostly boring corporate documents. But then she saw it. A folder labeled Nexus Restructure. Inside was the truth. It was worse than an affair. It was financial treason. Arthur and Genevieve were systematically embezzling money from their own son's company, Nexus Dynamics. They were using a shell corporation, Blackwood Capital, to file fraudulent invoices for consulting services. Millions of dollars every month, siphoned directly from Ethan's profits into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. But it got worse. The merger documents Arthur mentioned were papers that would officially merge Blackwood Capital into Nexus, disguised as a standard acquisition. And the signature line on the new merged entity, the Director of Acquisitions? It was blank. They were going to give Ilara that title as a wedding gift. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The Blackwood clause in the prenup. She hadn't seen it, but she could guess it. It declared that if the marriage ended, each party was responsible for the debts or crimes of any corporate entity they managed. It was a perfect diabolical trap. Have Alara sign the prenup, have her sign the merger papers at the wedding, making her the director of the fraudulent shell entity. Unleash Lauren to destroy the marriage. When the divorce hit, the fraud would be discovered. Who would be the obvious scapegoat? The new gold-digging wife, who was suddenly director of the corrupt entity. Alara Vance. They were going to frame her for their crimes. Ethan, betrayed by his wife and his cousin, would be emotionally shattered, and his parents would reluctantly step in to seize back control of his company. Alara felt the floor tilt. She gripped the desk for support. They weren't just trying to get rid of her. They were trying to erase her. She heard a noise, a creak in the hallway. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She grabbed a small USB drive from Arthur's desk drawer. With steady hands, she began copying the entire restructure folder. Every email, every bank transfer, every damning spreadsheet. She heard the doorknob turn. She slid the USB drive into her pocket and hit the computer's lock button, spinning in the chair just as the door opened. It was Ethan. He stood in the doorway, his face etched with confusion and a deep, unsettling calm. He looked at her, then at the computer, then back at her. "Alara, what are you doing in my father's study?" Her heart stopped. This was the moment of truth. Could she trust him? Was he a part of it? Arthur's texts implied Ethan was a victim, but she couldn't be sure. She took a deep breath and made her choice. "I think," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "you and I need to postpone the honeymoon. We have a problem." She told him everything. She laid out Lauren's plot. She explained the Balenciaga dress. And then, she told him about Blackwood Capital, the embezzlement, and the trap they had set for her. She watched his face, expecting rage, disbelief, or denial. Instead, Ethan Thayer listened with an intensity that chilled her. His expression did not change. When she was finished, he was silent for a full minute. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Finally, he spoke. "You found all of this in 3 days. Ethan, are you hearing me? Your parents are criminals. They are framing me. Lauren is—" "I know," he said. Alara stared. You know? "I've known they were stealing from me for 2 years," Ethan said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I just didn't know how they were doing it. Blackwood Capital. That's the piece I was missing. And I had no idea they would pull Lauren into it. That's new." "You knew? And you let me walk into this? You let them humiliate me?" "Alara," he said, stepping into the room. "I knew they were thieves. I didn't know they were monsters. I thought they just wanted money. I didn't realize they wanted to destroy you." He looked at the USB in her hand. "They underestimated you. They think you are a museum piece. They don't realize you are a weapon." "What do we do?" she whispered. "We call the police. We call off the wedding." "No," Ethan said, a hard light coming into his eyes. "We do neither. The wedding is tomorrow. 500 of the most powerful people in the world will be here. My parents plan to destroy us. What they don't realize is, we plan to destroy them." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Ethan said, taking the USB drive from her hand, "you're going to wear your beautiful dress. You're going to walk down that aisle, and you and I are going to put on the performance of our lives." The performance of their lives. The morning of the wedding was a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. Alara was laced into the garish, stiff Balenciaga gown by a fawning Lauren. "You look stunning," Lauren gushed, her eyes bright with duplicity. "So much better than that old rag. You look like a Thayer." "Thank you, Lauren," Alara said, her voice smooth as silk. "I couldn't have done this without you." Genevieve was in her element, marching through the halls of Greycliff, barking orders at staff. She saw Alara and gave a rare, thin smile. See? I told you that dress was better. Finally fitting in. You were right, Genevieve, Elara said. Today is a day for new beginnings. Gongs. The house overflowed with hydrangeas. A string quartet played softly. Guests began to arrive. The CEO of J.P. Morgan, a senator from New York, tech rivals from Silicon Valley. It was a sea of power, and Elara, Ethan, and his parents were at the center. Ethan found her just before the ceremony. He looked impossibly handsome in his tuxedo. He took her hands. Are you ready? No, she whispered truthfully. I'm terrified. Good, he said. Use it. Remember, they want you to be the trembling, naive bride. They're counting on it. Then he leaned in and whispered, I sent a small gift to your room, something new. I think you should wear it. He left. Elara, confused, rushed back to her bridal suite. On the bed, perfectly spread out, was her original vintage 1930s dress. It was pristine. The wine stain was gone. A small note was pinned to it. My friend at the Met Museum is a genius with textiles. I could never let you marry in a dress chosen by our enemies. Elara stripped off the Balenciaga and pulled on her dress. When she stepped out at the top of the grand staircase, she saw Genevieve's face. The matriarch's smile froze, and her eyes widened in pure fury. Elara simply smiled and began her descent. The ceremony itself was a blur. It took place on the lawn, the Atlantic crashing violently against the bluffs below. Elara and Ethan stood under an arch of white roses. She could feel Arthur's gaze on her. She could feel Lauren standing beside her, radiating smug victory. They said their vows. Elara's voice was steady. I promise to be your partner, she said, looking straight into Ethan's eyes, in truth and transparency, with no secrets between us. Your world is mine, and my world is yours, always. Ethan's vows were equally loaded. I promise to honor you, to protect you, and to build a life with you, based on unconditional trust. I will be your shield, and I will be your sword. No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it. They were pronounced husband and wife. Ethan kissed her, a brief, hard kiss that felt less like romance and more like a pact. The crowd erupted. The trap was set. The reception was held in the grand ballroom, a cavernous space with gold leaf ceilings and crystal chandeliers that once belonged to a Russian czar. The atmosphere was ebullient. Champagne flowed like water. Elara and Ethan had their first dance. They're watching us, Elara whispered, as Ethan twirled her. Of course, he murmured back. My mother is livid about the dress. My father is already calculating how long it will take to get you to sign those papers, and Lauren is probably picking out the china pattern for her wedding to me. This is insane, she said. This is justice, he replied. It's time for the toasts. They took their seats at the head table. Arthur, as father of the groom, stood up first. He tapped his glass. Friends, family, he began, his voice booming. We are here to celebrate a joining. When my son Ethan first built his company, he did it with ideas. But ideas are fleeting. It is legacy that endures. It is family that endures. He raised his glass to Elara. We are so surprised Ethan chose someone so simple, but we're certain she'll learn the Thayer way. She is a quick study after all. We welcome you, Elara, to the family. The applause was polite. It was a clear, public insult. Next, Genevieve rose. To Ethan and Elara, may they be as happy as they deserve. Another veiled threat. Then, Lauren. To my dearest cousin, Elara, she gushed, lifting her glass. We've been through so much. I'm so happy you finally found someone to take care of you. You deserve all the happiness in the world. And to Ethan, welcome to the family. I look forward to getting to know you much better. She winked. It was disgusting. Alara felt the stares of 500 people. Finally, it was Alara's turn. Ethan squeezed her hand. She stood up, walking toward the microphone. The room quieted. "Thank you," she began, her voice soft, making the crowd lean in. "Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Genevieve and Arthur, for this extravagant welcome. And thank you, Lauren, for everything." She smiled, a small, sad smile. "Arthur mentioned that I'm a quick study, and he's right. I've learned a lot since meeting the Thayers. I've learned about art, about business, about family values." She turned to Ethan's AV technician, who was manning the large screen set up for a romantic slideshow. "Jamie, could you please run the presentation I gave you? I call it the Thayer Family Values." Genevieve looked confused. Arthur narrowed his eyes. "Of course, Mrs. Thayer," the technician said. The screens flickered. But it wasn't a photo of Alara and Ethan. It was a bank statement. A $50,000 transfer from Thayer Industries to a private account. "This first slide," Alara said, her voice gaining strength, "is a generous gift from my new father-in-law, Arthur Thayer, to my maid of honor, Lauren. A thank you for her services." A collective gasp swept the room. Lauren went white. Click. The next slide. It was the text thread, blown up, 20 feet high. "Arthur, this marriage cannot last more than 6 months. Lauren, I know. I'll make my move on Ethan. He's lonely. I'll be the comfort he needs. Arthur, we will seize back control of the board. Nexus Dynamics will be ours. This," Alara said, her voice ringing with ice, "is the plan. Hire my own cousin. Seduce my husband, fabricate an infidelity scandal, and steal his company. A round of applause for family values, please." Lauren let out a choked sob and slumped in her chair. "But wait," Alara said. "There's more." Click. The next slide. A complex diagram of shell corporations. Nexus Dynamics at the top. An arrow pointing to Blackwood Capital, Cayman Islands. "This," Alara said, "is the real family business. Embezzlement. For the last 2 years, Arthur and Genevieve Thayer have been siphoning millions of dollars from their own son." Arthur shot to his feet, his face purple. "This is slander, lies, security. Turn this off." "Oh, but it's not slander if it's true, Arthur," Alara said. "I found the Blackwood file in your study, the one password protected with the name of your favorite racehorse." Arthur froze. "And the best part," Alara continued, her voice shaking with righteous fury, "was the trap you set for me. The plan to make me the director of Blackwood Capital, to frame me for your fraud, to send me to prison while you stole my husband's empire." The ballroom was in chaos. Guests were standing. The senator looked horrified. The J.P. Morgan CEO was already heading for the door. Genevieve shrieked, a high animalistic sound. "Bitch! Ungrateful gutter rat! We gave you everything!" "You gave me nothing," Alara spat. "You tried to take everything. You ruined my dress. You insulted my family and tried to put me in a cage. You thought I was stupid. You thought I was weak. You thought I was just a simple girl from a museum." All eyes were on Alara. All eyes were on the fuming, exposed Thayers. And then all eyes turned to the one person who hadn't spoken. Ethan Thayer, the billionaire groom. The billionaire's trap. The world paused. For one full, agonizing second, the only sound in the opulent ballroom was the high-fidelity feedback of the microphone Alara had just dropped. It swung gently on its stand, a pendulum ticking out the end of an era. The images, the texts, the bank transfers, the Blackwood Capital logo were burned onto the massive screens. an impossible-to-ignore monument to the Thayer's betrayal. Ilara's heart hammered so hard, she felt it in her teeth. Her hands were slick with cold sweat. She had done it. She had lit the match and thrown it into the powder keg. She stood at the epicenter of the blast and had no idea who, if anyone, would be left standing. Then the world shattered. It wasn't a gasp. It was a roar. A cacophony of 500 voices erupting at once. Chairs scraped, glass tumblers fell, and a sea of tuxedos and couture gowns shifted as people surged to their feet. Senator Thompson's face was a mask of political horror. Mr. Davies, the J.P. Morgan CEO, was already on his phone, his face grim, no doubt short-selling Thayer stock. But the true explosion came from the head table. "Ethan!" Genevieve's scream was inhuman. It was a primal, animalistic sound of a creature struck dead. She lunged, not for Ilara, but for the nearest projection screen, her lacquered nails raking at the image of their own texts. "Lies! Slander! Turn it off! Turn it off!" Lauren simply imploded. She made a small, choking sound and slid from her chair, a boneless puppet whose strings had been cut, collapsing onto the floor in a heap of designer tulle and shame. Arthur, however, was pure volcanic rage. His face was a terrifying shade of mottled purple. "Bitch!" he roared, pushing his chair back so hard it toppled over. He wasn't aiming for the screens. He was aiming for Ilara. "Ungrateful gutter rat! I'll kill you!" He was halfway to her before a wall of black-suited security men materialized, intercepting him with the brutal efficiency of a linebacker tackling a quarterback. He slammed into them, his fists flailing. "Grab her! She's a corporate spy! She planted that evidence! She's lying! She's trying to ruin us! Ruin my son!" This was the moment of truth. Ilara's eyes snapped to the one person in the room who mattered, the one man whose reaction would decide her fate. Ethan Thayer, her husband. He hadn't moved. He stood perfectly still in the midst of the pandemonium, watching the mayhem erupt. He watched his mother clawing at a screen like a lunatic. He watched his father, his Mayflower lineage reduced to a punching thug, spitting obscenities as security contained him. He watched Lauren, crying hysterically, mascara and desperation streaking her face. Ilara's breath caught. He was calm. Too calm. Was this the part where he disavowed her, where he painted her as a hysterical, jilted bride? Had she miscalculated? Was he also part of a trap so deep she hadn't seen the bottom? Arthur saw his son's stillness and mistook it for shock. "Ethan!" he bellowed, straining against the security wall. Tell her she's a liar. Tell her you hate her. Tell them it's all her doing." Ethan Thayer let the silence linger. He allowed his father's accusation to float in the air, thick and poisonous. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. Calmly, he picked up the heavy crystal water goblet from their table. He looked at it, then looked at his father. And he threw it, not at his father, but onto the floor by his father's feet, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. The resulting crash cut through the remaining noise like a gunshot. A terrified, absolute silence fell over the room. Ethan picked up the microphone from the head table. The electronic pop as he turned it on was like a judge's gavel. He looked at his father, who was still gasping for breath, his $10,000 tuxedo ripped at the shoulder. Ethan's expression wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was the kind of disappointment a professor shows a star student who just cheated on a simple test. "She didn't fake anything, Father," Ethan said. His voice was amplified, cold, and clear as a diamond. It echoed off the gold leaf ceilings. Not a single thing. A new wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Arthur's face went from purple to a sickly white. Ethan addressed the 500 stunned guests. My wife is a brilliant woman, a curator, a researcher. Her entire life is dedicated to finding the truth beneath the paint, the provenance behind the artifact. And in 3 days, she uncovered a criminal conspiracy that has been poisoning my company and my life for years. He turned to his parents. She is completely correct. My parents are thieves. My wife's cousin is a whore for hire. Everything you see on those screens is the unvarnished, pathetic truth. Ilara felt a wave of relief so powerful her knees almost buckled. He believed her. He was standing up for her. But Ethan wasn't finished. He held up a hand. But the truth is, Ilara only found about 70% of it. A new silence of confusion. Ilara looked at him, startled. What? Genevieve, who was gasping by the screen, froze. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Ethan smiled. A thin, dangerous smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. That other 30%, the accounts in Switzerland that Blackwood Capital was feeding. The 80 million in laundered art purchases my mother has been gifting to international museums to clean the money? The bribery. Oh, that's my favorite part. He pointed the microphone, not at his parents, but at the crowd. Isn't that right, Senator Navarro? The senator from New York looked like he'd been shot. That anonymous $5 million donation to your youth foundation, right after that Nexus Dynamics defense contract, was suddenly approved by the committee? The one my father personally lobbied for, against my express wishes? Senator Navarro began backing away, muttering to an aide, Get the car now." Ethan's gaze swept the room. My parents weren't just embezzling. They were committing wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to bribe a public official. They weren't just trying to steal Nexus Dynamics. They were using it as their personal piggy bank to commit federal crimes. He finally looked at his father, who was now shaking. You see, Father, my wife, in her brilliance, was gathering evidence for what she thought was a divorce filing or a criminal case to save herself. I, Ethan said, tapping his own chest, have been gathering evidence for the Southern District of New York for 18 months. The gasp in the room was so sharp, it stole the air. Arthur Thayer's legs gave out, and he staggered, grabbing a chair for support. He was looking at his son as if for the first time. This wedding, Ethan announced, his voice ringing with the finality of a death sentence, was a trap. But not for my wife. It was never for her. It was for you. Ilara's mind reeled. 18 months? He knew. He knew the whole time. I knew they were stealing from me since the Q 2023 audit. Ethan continued, his voice a quiet, terrifying monotone, as if explaining a complex algorithm. I knew you were arrogant. I knew you, Mother, were consumed with a bitterness that was rotting you inside because your son outshone you. I knew you hated Ilara because she was smart and kind and mine. So I let them, he said. I let them steal. I let them build their little shell corporation. I let them plan their takeover. I fed them false information. I let them believe they were winning. Because I wasn't just building a civil case. I was building a federal one. I needed you to commit so many crimes, so publicly, that no lawyer, no judge, no dynasty could detach you from it. I just needed one final, public piece of evidence to prove motive and intent beyond any doubt. I needed to show the world why you were doing it, that you were trying to frame an innocent woman. And you, he sneered, walked right onto the stage I built for you. Ethan, please. Son, Arthur began, his voice a pathetic whine. Blood. I'm your father. Blood. Ethan laughed, a cold, barking sound. Blood is what you have on your hands. You were going to sacrifice an innocent woman to save your own skins. You were going to let Ilara rot in a federal prison for your crimes. You are not my father. You're just the man whose name I'll be legally removing from mine starting tomorrow. Genevieve finally found her voice, a low, poisonous hiss. "After everything I did for you, I made you. I gave you this life. You made me a target." Ethan cut her off. "You made me paranoid. You made me ruthless. And today, you get to see the fruits of your labor. Thank you for the education, Mother. It's the only valuable thing you've ever given me." Then, almost as an afterthought, he aimed his gaze at the sobbing puddle on the floor. "Lauren," he said. Lauren Vance looked up, her face a grotesque mask of ruined makeup and terror. Ethan, please, he forced me. Arthur, he threatened me. He threatened my family. Ethan merely shook his head in disgust. "You were a €50,000 mistake. My father overpaid. You're not even a good actress. You have no loyalty. You have no guts. Just empty. Get out of my sight." The room was silent. The execution was over. Finally, Ethan Thayer turned to his wife. He clipped off the microphone and dropped it onto the table. The war was done. He walked to her, ignoring the wreckage of his family, ignoring the 500 staring faces. He stepped past the toppled chair and the weeping figure of her cousin. He stood in front of Alara, who was shaking, caught between terror, relief, and a seismic, profound shock. "You knew," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You knew everything." "I let you be you," he whispered back, just for her. "You didn't tell me," she said, and there was a new kind of pain in her voice. "You let me walk into this. You let them humiliate me, the dress." "I couldn't," he said, his voice softening for the first time, his eyes at last, warm and filled with an emotion she couldn't name. "Not entirely. If I had told you my plan, if I had told you I was working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, you would have become a co-conspirator. Your evidence would be tainted. This way." He gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are an innocent party who discovered a crime and acted to protect herself. Your hands are clean. Your testimony is pristine and untainted. That's the legal reason anyway." "And the real reason?" she whispered. "The real reason," he said, his thumb tracing the outline of the ring he'd placed on her finger, "is that I had to see. I had to know. My whole life has been a fortress, Alara. I've been surrounded by liars and thieves and sycophants, people who wanted my money or my name or my power. I've never been able to trust anyone, not my parents, not my friends. And then I met you. You didn't care about the Nexus building. You cared about the 19th century facade it was built behind. You didn't care about my stock. You cared about the pigment in a painting." "I don't understand," she said, her head spinning. "You tested me," she whispered. "You threw me to the wolves." "No," he said, his voice firm, filled with conviction. "I trusted you. I trusted that the woman who can spot a forgery from a single brushstroke could spot the vipers in her own home. I trusted that the woman who can patiently restore a shattered 14th century fresco would have the strength to rebuild a broken life. I didn't test you, Alara. I bet on you. I bet my entire life, my entire company, and my entire future on you. And you just won me the world." And with that, he leaned in and kissed her. It was not the chaste ceremonial kiss on the lawn. This was a kiss of fire and iron, a kiss of partnership, a kiss that sealed a pact. It was a kiss that said, "You and me, against everyone." Alara, shaking and overwhelmed, kissed him back with all the fear, the fury, and the relief she possessed. In that moment, surrounded by the ruins of their wedding, they were the only two people on Earth. When they finally broke apart, Ethan kept his arm anchored around her waist, protective and unwavering. His voice, no longer needing a microphone, was iron once more. It sliced through the silence. Security, he boomed. Two burly men, Mr. Thorne and Mr. Diaz, who looked more like counter-terrorism unit than wedding security, stepped forward. "Sir, my parents and Miss Vance are trespassing," Ethan said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "They have 10 seconds to vacate the ballroom, 30 seconds to vacate the property before I have them arrested. Please, escort them out." "You can't do this," Arthur roared, finding one last burst of adrenaline. He was truly unhinged now. "This is my home. I am Arthur Thayer. You'll hear from my lawyers. I'll destroy you, Ethan. I will." "You'll have to visit him at Rikers Island," Ethan said, addressing the air, not even looking at his father. "The federal warrants are being executed now. My lawyers are at the federal courthouse filing a motion to deny bail, citing you as a flight risk. You don't have lawyers, Father. You don't have a home. You don't have money." He finally turned his head. "Oh, that reminds me. I bought the mortgage on Greycliff 3 months ago, after you defaulted for years. You haven't been living here. You've been squatting. I own the house. I own the art. I own the land." He looked at his mother's horrified expression. "I even own that garish dress you're wearing." That was the final blow. Arthur Thayer didn't just break. He shattered. The fight went out of him. He was an old, ruined man. Mr. Thorne and Mr. Diaz didn't wait. They were professionals. Each took one of Arthur's arms and began marching him unceremoniously towards the grand ballroom doors. "No!" Genevieve shrieked, grasping at a tapestry. "No, you can't. This is my life, my name." Another guard pulled her kicking and screaming away from the wall. Lauren, silent, empty, and wide-eyed as if her soul had been scraped out, was lifted by a third security guard. Her legs barely supported her. She stumbled forward, unable to fully walk on her own, and the guard half-dragged, half-guided her across the room. Her designer heels scraped helplessly against the polished parquet floor. The march that followed was nothing short of a public, social execution, a slow, agonizing walk of humiliation. No one dared break the silence except for Genevieve's shattered, incoherent sob, the kind that doesn't come from grief, but from shock and the sudden freefall of losing everything at once. 500 guests, the global elite, the powerful, the feared, the untouchable, instinctively stepped aside, parting in a wave like the Red Sea, making way for the condemned. At the grand entrance, the doors were flung open. The trio was unceremoniously ushered out into the cold, fog-shrouded Hamptons night. The wind hit them hard, brutally, as if the outside world rejected them now too. Then, slam! The colossal doors closed with a dull, resonating thud that sounded final, irrevocable. A sentence delivered. Silence seeped back into the ballroom. But this silence was different, heavier, awkward, suspended in disbelief. 1,500 of the world's most influential, wealthy, and powerful individuals now stood frozen, facing a 30-year-old billionaire and the woman he had just fought for. What was the protocol now? Did one politely gather one's coat and leave? Was the gala over? Or did life impossibly go on? Ethan Thayer still had his arm, anchored around his wife's waist, protective and unwavering. He allowed himself a moment to survey the ballroom. He took in the pale, stunned faces, the half-eaten plates of delicacies no one would dare touch again, the champagne glasses abandoned mid-toast, and the string quartet huddled in the corner like startled deer awaiting the hunter's next shot. Then he smiled. A real smile. One that softened his features and lit his face with warmth, and something almost boyish, something no one there had ever seen on him before. "Well," he said, his voice rich, quiet, even gently amused, as if acknowledging the absurdity of the last 10 minutes. "That was messy." A few scattered, shaky laughs escaped, the kind people give when they aren't sure if laughter is safe. but relief starts to break through. Ethan turned his gaze to the trembling string quartet. "Gentlemen," he addressed them, his voice firm and resonant enough to re-anchor the room. "My wife and I," he put unmistakable emphasis on wife, "never got to have our first dance. If I recall correctly, we requested, 'at last.'" The lead violinist blinked, stunned, but nodded frantically. The musicians raised their instruments with visible nervousness, exchanging quick, wide-eyed glances. Ethan extended his hand to Alara. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Thayer?" Alara, still mentally reeling from everything that had happened, the chaos, the revelation, the public downfall of her enemies, looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked into his eyes, finding warmth there, certainty, and a promise of safety she had never known before. The fear loosened. The shock receded. What was left was him. She placed her hand in his. Her voice was soft but sure. "Yes. Yes, you may." He led her to the center of the vast, now empty dance floor. The soulful opening notes of Etta James slid into the air, melting the tension clinging to the walls. Ethan pulled her close, not possessively, but reverently. And under the gold leaf chandeliers, with 500 silent witnesses, the newly crowned king and his queen began to dance. It wasn't tentative or shy. It wasn't a fairy tale waltz. It was a victory dance, deliberate, powerful, and intimate. A dance of equals, a dance of two survivors who had chosen each other and won. Slowly a sound rose, an applause, hesitant at first. It began with Mr. Davies, a CEO notorious for never showing emotion. He stood up, clapping with genuine, awestruck respect, aimed directly at Ethan. Then, one by one, others joined in. The applause grew, swelled, became thunderous. This was not polite wedding applause. It was a standing ovation for the mastery, for the transformation, for the elegant ruthlessness of a power shift perfectly executed. "What happens now?" Alara whispered against his chest, her head resting there, as if she had finally found a place she belonged. For the first time that night, she exhaled fully. She felt safe. "Now," Ethan murmured into her hair, holding her close as the music swelled around them, cradling them from the world that watched. "We begin our marriage. We go home. Not here. To our home. And we build a life. The life we both deserve." They thought she was a pawn in their game, a simple girl they could crush and discard. They didn't realize she was the player who would flip the whole board. Alara and Ethan's wedding day didn't end with a honeymoon. It ended with the complete dismantling of a corrupt dynasty. Justice and karma served cold in front of 500 guests. Conclusion and final call to action. What did you think of Alara's revenge? Was Ethan's master plan even more shocking? We have new stories like this dropping every week, packed with drama, twists, and ultimate payback. If you love this, you won't want to miss what's next. Don't forget to hit the like button. If you enjoyed the story, share this video with someone who loves a good revenge plot. And most importantly, subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss an update. Comment below with what you want to see next.